Good afternoon. I'm Vincent Field with DNBC, and I'm speaking with Amelia Rogers. So, Amelia, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and your work?
Yes. Well, I am from my accent, you understand. I wasn't born here. I was born in Italy and from a family of doctors and diplomats. And lived in Italy, went to school around Italy and other countries like, where did I go?
England and Switzerland.
In Switzerland. So I just came to this country because I married my husband, but my family is all in Italy. I don't have anybody here, but just my husband and the children and grandchildren now. And so my first language, of course, is Italian. And I went to school, and my second language, believe it or not, was Greek, and also, what is another one?
French.
French. I mean, I never had English until I came to this country, pretty much. And, I spent my life studying, always being very interested in studying, and pretty much that's about it. And I was really lucky that I married my husband, and I have 2 children and 4 grandchildren, and I'm very happy here, and that's about it.
Great. So, tell us about your work.
My work, actually, I went to school. I mean, and the school I went to is fairly common in Italy. But anyway, my main thing were Latin and Greek, ancient Greek. So until I went to university, I just studied Italian, Latin, and ancient Greek. Then in university, I went and I studied modern languages. And then eventually I married my husband and married him and came here. And yeah.
So just a little background, if I could throw in on the background of the book. We attended a lecture at the Boston Public Library by a well-known historian by the name of Barbara Tuchman. She had written a book called The Guns of August, which was about the outbreak of World War I. But she wrote another book called A Distant Mirror, which was about the Middle Ages. And I think that inspired both of us to be interested in that period. And Amelia kind of picked it up and started doing her own research and found this story of the 4 princesses. But that's kind of the connection.
So, what inspired you to write this book about the 4 daughters of the Count of Provence?
Because I always loved writing. And even if I wrote Italian and French for a long time before I got married, something that I liked. And also because there are 4 women and very interesting lives. And I just like reading. And this my life, reading and thinking about things and about the past. The history is very important to me, and the way I went to school in Italy was we do Italy. It was Italian, but also we do, as I told you, probably Greek and ancient Italy. Oh God, what is it? So I don't know. I always been very studious, and I always loved learning. That has been the passion of my life. And it still is. And I don't know, it just was easy enough. Also, no, there's another thing. I come from a family of doctors, but both my grandparents were doctors, but I also had the one who was an ambassador, and he wrote about history, and that's probably just gave me the idea.
Great.
One of the specific inspirations as well, it's kind of interesting, the Italian poet Dante wrote about these 4 princesses as a prophecy. And he said this monk had made a prophecy to the Count of Provence that you're going to have 4 daughters, each of whom will become a queen. So it's kind of tied into the whole historical context.
Yeah, because, for us, Dante is a god, and we study for many years, in fact, 8 years almost. And so for us, is what it is Shakespeare for you, perhaps. But Dante, but it is, you're right, it is one of the reasons. I first read about the princesses, it was in Dante.
How did you conduct research for this book?
Well, I wrote this book in France, still in France, and I think I went to the library. This was about the library, and I did the library here in Lomé. I mean, when I came back here, when I came here, just books, libraries.
We did quite a bit of research at the Harvard Library to get the historical context. So I guess that's one of the things that's interesting about this book. It's a historical novel, but it's based on knowing the history, and then the novel part is putting the imagination into the characters.
Yeah, and I also always traveled a lot in Europe, especially all over Europe. So, I'm a European, so these girls are from Europe, and it was very easy for me to think about them and think the way they would behave.
So why did you choose to focus on the Middle Ages and the lives of these noble women during that time?
Because I had a passion for the Middle Ages. The school I went to, the main thing we did was Latin and ancient Greek. But we also did a little bit of modern languages. But I don't know, I had this passion for the Middle Ages. I just did. I just liked it.
I would also say the Middle Ages, we tend to think of the word medieval as pejorative, but actually it's a period coming out of the Dark Ages, beginning in the years after 1000 and into the 13th century, which is when these books take place, or these stories take place. It was really the formation of the modern world, and you had the rise of the universities, you had the religious orders, you had a religious rebirth, revitalization, you had the Crusades, which was a sort of a clash of civilizations. And then you had the formation of the modern nation states, which didn't exist before. So France, the province of Provence became part of France through this dynastic alliance. Germany was the Holy Roman Empire. England was a country, but it also occupied a big chunk of France. Italy didn't exist as a country, but then with the Queen Beatrice becoming Queen of Sicily, that was part of bringing Italy into the framework and taking it out of the Roman Empire and making it a separate country. So there's a whole formative period when the modern world was taking shape, but it hadn't actually taken shape yet.
Yeah, but this, and I just loved history. I mean, I just did from the very beginning, and I was my parents and where I lived, I was good for it. And I just read all my life, and that was my passion. And I never could think about anything else but reading. And especially though the history just fascinated me. And also, I already knew very young as that I already knew French. I did lots of French. So it was easy for me to talk about women from France because not only Italian is very close to France, but I mean, I went to school and I learned with my grandfather. I learned French when I was very young. So this was just normal. I mean, there was not a big thinking about it,
So what was the process like for bringing the characters to life in the story? Did you draw from any real life experiences or people to create them?
Not very much. I think I really read the books. And I just invented from the books that I read, and I probably normally you put yourself in your people. So I certainly did put parts of myself, but also knowing how they ended up, what kind of future they had, you can start, thinking of them. Perhaps the ways of thinking starts when they're very young. And it was just, I don't know. For me, it was normal. I mean, I just didn't. It was just normal. I didn't. And also, I had a sister, and two brothers, but I have a sister, so perhaps that had an influence because I could see in the meeting I had some good love with my sister, some bad love with my sister, so that was easy enough. I don't know. I found the things very easy. I just find it very easy.
So how did you balance historical accuracy with your creative liberties that you took while telling the story?
Of liberty. I mean, I just thought that the girls were very, very, very. The girls I'm talking about were very
Very interesting.
free, very, very free, and very interesting. That's just one of the great things. I mean, the women were just, very important, and they, they behave like perhaps women we would behave nowadays. I didn't find anything. I just took them. They were like me.
But also, I think in terms of, it's an interesting question, because as a historian, you can go with the facts. As a novelist, you can put personality and context into the facts. And I think that's what makes good historical fiction so valuable. You learn about the period, you learn about the history, but you also have a story, and the story is based on the facts, based on the history, but it's got the human element, which, particularly when you're talking about the Middle Ages, it's a period so distant, but you can really begin to think about, how did these people approach problems? How did they feel? What were their conflicts? And you can inject all of that into the historical context in a historically accurate way.
And also, can I say something that you don't know? But anyway, something that perhaps you don't understand. Being an Italian and studying Latin and Greek, you just don't think of the world of today as the real world. You have so much coming from other places, so it is easier to think about people of today, thinking about these people, because I did I don't know how many years of Latin and Greek, in Latin and in Greek, written in Latin and in Greek, and so I knew these people, and so it's easy to go from my people to the new. The girls were other girls in Italy, or in what is it called?
France.
No, the girl, I can't even say. But anyway, the other language that I learned, what was it? Greek. God. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, for me I never thought about them being different. I just couldn't think, because I thought they were, they lived in a different time, and they had different things happening to them. But at the same time, I just had seen so many things in Rome and in what is the other country, in Greece, that to me it was very easy. I don't know, I can't tell you, but the people were like me. It was very easy.
So, what themes or messages do you hope readers will take away from your book?
Could I maybe pitch in on that? I would say there are a couple of themes. One is just the story of women who are close to power. I mean, we think about situations today with somebody like a Hillary Clinton, and how that works and how women can influence the political process. I think the second theme is really how interesting that period of the Middle Ages is, that people just don't know about it. And some of the drama, for example, of the Crusades, these women were on crusades for almost 5 years. They went with their husbands, both Beatrice and her sister Marguerite, went to the Middle East, went to Egypt. They had babies while they were there. And so there's a whole kind of historical context. And then I think the other theme that to me stands out is each period in history and each culture, each civilization has a particular role for women. And in the Middle Ages, the women didn't have formal rights, obviously rights to vote and things that we take for granted nowadays, but they had significant power through these dynastic alliances. Mm-hmm. And then there was also kind of a cult of women with people like Joan of Arc, who was so influential in the history of France. There was a cult of the Virgin, the mother of Christ, the Virgin Mary. So I think it kind of makes you think about how women influence history and whether they have direct control or direct power or not, they have a great influence. So I think those are some important themes. Obviously, it's a story, and hopefully it's a story that engages people. because of the human qualities, but I think it has a lot more to it.
Because we haven't changed. You know, times have gone and different things have happened, but we are really people. We people are the same. So it's very easy to think about other people because, you know, there are different things happening to them, but deep inside we are the same. We just love or hate or, you know, so it just for me was, didn't make any, you know, it's just very easy to think about women.
In what ways do you think the lives of these four sisters impacted the political landscape of that time?
I would say that the political landscape was very much formed because that's how France became the southern part of France and the northern part of France. England was very much influenced by that conflict between the French and the English, and there was a sister on the throne of each country. And then the fact that Italy, instead of being part of the Holy Roman Empire, which is Manfred, the lover or the romantic interest of Beatrice, that came under her actual husband, who made her the Queen of Sicily. So a lot of the formation of these nation states took place, began to take place. It wasn't completed, but it began to take place during exactly that period. And these women, each of their roles in each particular way, had a big influence on that.
But it was, I mean, I don't know. I think that there is not a big difference between the women of today and the women of my days. There is a period when, for instance, the girls are supposed to be just stay home and do things. But during the Middle Ages, the women were much more the women like today. And I think that is interesting to see. Because you cannot think of women at that time as the women of the 1800s, that they couldn't do anything without their husband, etc. No, they took care. I mean, you know, this is the way we are now. We are in charge, and they were too. I mean, I don't think it is very different. I don't.
What do you think were the biggest challenges of women that time that they faced, both personally and politically?
I would say they really come down to this dynastic relationship. So, for example, Beatrice had this romantic relationship, a very deep one, with Manfred, but it was an unconsummated affair because she was married to the Count of Anjou, who was the brother of the King of France, and was loyal to him. For example, she mortgaged her jewels in order to raise the army that he needed to go and conquer Sicily. So there was a balancing act and necessity to look at the personal as well as the dynastic considerations. Those dynastic considerations were always there, but obviously the personal influence was there as well.
Yeah, to go back, I think there is not a big difference 1,000 years ago and today. There isn't. We are the same women. Especially now that we have so many opportunities, we can do so many things. It's like my girls in those days, because they could do anything they wanted, really. I mean, I know that I'm talking about people upper class, it's everything. I'm not talking, you know, the poor, etc., etc. But for somebody of today, I mean, I never was thinking, oh my God, and they lucky they did this and that. No, because we are too. We do what we want.
Was there a challenge in taking that historical context of the book and presenting it in a way that would be accessible to modern readers?
No. I don't know. I did it. No,
it seemed to come pretty natural.
Yeah, I never. Yeah, but I always wrote a lot, also in Italian. You see, because the schools I went to, you know, we did a lot of writing, and so not always was it either Italian or Latin or Greek. But I mean, just no. For me, reading is like thinking. I don't know. Just words are just. I love words. This is a great passion of my life, is words. I like to know where they come from, how they're doing it. I mean, I just love words in every language. I really do. And so I don't know, this, but I found everything very easy to do because, you can use the words. And most words I know where they come from, how they change through the centuries. And to me, this, but I agree, I'm pretty stupid. But anyway, to me, this is, I don't know. I just love it because I know the origin of all languages, of all words, and I love it. I love it. And I saw this way when I wrote the book. I mean, for me, it was talking about women of today because they're so different. We're all different, the same.
What do you think is the most fascinating aspect about the characters and the story?
I would say from my angle, the most fascinating part is just this complex relationship between not only Beatrice and Manfred, but the fact that Manfred had a different perspective, which rubbed off to a large degree on Beatrice. He had spent a lot of time in the Middle East. He knew the Muslim world. He was very much influenced by this transmission of culture through the Arabs, from the ancient Greeks to the modern world. And in fact, when he came to visit in Paris, one of the things he did was to come to attend lectures by Thomas Aquinas, who was the person who really brought together Greek and Christian theology. And that was a sort of a byproduct, I guess you could say, of this romance, which made it a very complex relationship. And at the same time, this woman had to balance her dynastic responsibilities to her own husband and her own country. So there was that very complex, as I say, balancing act between those two poles.
But also, as you say, but then things were different. What happened that was different from what is happening. But the people who were in charge of it were the same, because we are all the same. We haven't changed them. There are certain things that we see differently, but deep inside, women are all the same. I imagine men too, but I don't know. But women are all the same. We are the same as we were 1,000 years ago. What is this different? I can't see that. I mean, we have different opportunities now and in those days. This is the difference. But we react, I think, the same way.
So tell us about your future plans for this book, for the story. For example, maybe a movie is in the works.
Yeah, I think there's something, but I wrote another one. Do you know that?
She has another book about the Middle Ages that we're working on. But as for maybe I could talk a little bit about the movie project. It's something that's been percolating for quite some time, and it seems to be taking shape. There are a lot of details which aren't clear yet, so we can't really lay them out, but I think it could be quite exciting. There's a director who's pretty well known, who's showed an interest in it. There's several actors and actresses who've shown some interest. So hopefully all of this will come together. And again, our interest in this whole project is to make sure that it respects the integrity of the story. And I think the scripts that we put together do that, but also give a feeling for the historical context. So it's, if you like, educational as well as entertaining. I mean, you can watch the Game of Thrones, but this is going to be based on historical fact. So I think somebody who watches the movie will come away saying, gee, I kind of understand a little bit better what this whole period was about and how these events in history influenced what came later and how people functioned within this different context, which, as Amelia says, is different, but it's also in many ways the same. The situation of women, the influence of women, the role of women. It's a recurring and perennial theme. And I think that's what we're trying to make sure gets conveyed in the movie. So it has that sort of, feel like, educational as well as entertainment component to it.
So can you tell us about the next book?
Yeah, wait, they talk because you
The next
it's
book
already ready. It's ready.
is similar. It's takes place about 100 years later in the 14th century, the 1300s, which is the time of the 100 Years' War between Britain and England and France. And the protagonist of that book is Isabel of Bavaria, who she was a German princess who came to France and married the King of France. And the King of France became insane. So she wound up essentially running the government for a period of time. And her son, who was the crown prince, was the one who eventually wound up collaborating with Joan of Arc to fight against the English and kick them out of France. So again, it's a very complex period with a lot of dynastic interplay. And again, this woman, Isabel, was a key figure because of being the Queen of France and essentially running the government for a period of time. But then you have another influential woman, Joan of Arc, who was sort of her counterpart, who had a huge influence on history. So the themes are very similar.
That sounds really fascinating. I'm sure the readers are going to love that. So before we sign off, are there any final words you'd like to say to the audience?
I think we've put a lot of work into this, and obviously Amelia wrote the books, but I've tried to kind of stay up in touch with the whole project, and I've been doing a lot of work on the potential movie. So I'm really hoping that people will take an interest in this period, in these characters, and that this will be a way to educate people on a period of history that's very interesting and important. Maybe cast some light on this whole conflict between the Muslim world and the Western world, which is still in a way going on.
Yeah.
And also just to show that, as Amelia has said, the role of women keeps changing, but the more it changes, the more it's the same. The same themes keep reoccurring. And I think you can see that in what's going on today, and then you can relate it back to that historical context. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish with this whole project.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking
Thank
to
you.
us.
Thank you.
You are watching DNBC Business Channel.